morning, guys.
Hi, Karen. How are you?
Just haven't spoken to you both in so long. It's been ages. Am I okay to just leave you to your own device here for a few minutes, and then I can still hear you. So if you need me, just call me, and then I'll come back online. But you know,
Yeah.
My video icon down left-hand side corner has been grayed out.
Yeah, I can see that too. How are you connecting? Are you doing it through LinkedIn again?
Nope, it didn't ask me for anything this time around.
Oh wow, it actually worked.
It worked. So I was not asked to authenticate at all. So when I just copy and pasted the link from the invite into a Google browser, Chrome browser, it just opened up.
She must have been logged in already, or who knows.
I had logged in to the general theme, like to the headline, intro. I was in the main stage just before.
Oh yeah. And that worked fine with your video?
That worked fine. Let me leave and try to log back in.
Yeah, maybe try and even just refresh the browser. You can see.
Oh, he's gone.
No, he's refreshed his browser.
Karen, I've just heard from Matt that he is okay. There was a lot of back and forth, but he's fine to do the judging. So no.
Awesome. So still hasn't worked. What browser are you using, Lars? Hello?
Log out altogether and open up a brand new browser.
Sorry, I didn't hear.
Oh.
He's really good at troubleshooting this, though. This is what I've heard, because yesterday in our tech call, it didn't work. And I think in his tech calls last Friday, it also didn't work.
Yeah, I think there was problems logging in, but he's always normally okay on the camera. But then this is why because what time are we supposed to start in? 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out.
Yeah. I'm hoping I don't need to be on video for that. I can just sit. I'm just going to listen and make notes.
You don't need to. What was I going to ask you? Yeah, so Lars is obviously doing slides now, and then there'll be obviously audience interaction.
Do you want me to send you? I've got his slides. He was just a bit concerned if something happened and the slides disappeared, that someone should have them. But I've got them. But is it useful for you to have them as well?
Basically, we just need like a secondary person to be able to go like if it all craps out, which it hasn't yet all crapped out in a bad way, like in any sessions before. So it shouldn't do that now. But yeah, so as long as somebody has it. So if you have it and you'd be willing to share, yeah, then Lars would just have to obviously be like, advance the screen.
Okay. So. But I think he was worried that he wouldn't be able to see the chat. Because I think when he's practiced it, he can't see. So I don't know whether, is it helpful for me to just run the slides so that he can still see everything? Does that work? Or does that...
I think somebody would need to, basically. And it's, so if he wanted to, because even if he, actually, I can now see his picture. So I feel like that is an upgrade from what I saw before.
Oh, yay!
Oh my God!
So I logged out again, and WSI 2020 wouldn't allow me to, but LinkedIn allowed me to come back in.
Oh, that's so weird.
Yeah.
Oh, well, you're here. I was just saying, Lars, is it easier if I just run the slides so that you can then interact with everything on the screen and the chat? Because you were worried that you might not be able to see certain things if you have the presentation slides. Did you want me just to test? I could just test it.
Yeah.
So if I screen application window.
Hi, Joel.
Hi.
Guys, this is your fantastic moderator. This is Joel. He'll be the one introducing you and saying very flattering things about Lars.
Yes.
Well, to be fair, I would say I have decided as of our interview this morning, Lars, that I am now officially your biggest fan. So, yeah. Sorry, we apparently are live.
Yes, we are live already, I think. So let's start the introduction. Welcome everybody to our first session today, which will be brought to you by Lars Vestergaard, Market Connect Oracle for Startups. Oracle for Startups serves startups worldwide by enabling next generation growth, business development, and driving cloud-based innovation for startups, their customers, and Oracle. Market Connect introduces startups to Oracle customers. Lars will be talking you through how to develop 20-second pitches that will get your startup in the door at larger corporations, along with proven techniques to partner with and sell to enterprise clients. Over to you, Lars.
Thank you very much for that.
Hi, sorry, Lars. Hold on, Lars.
Conscious of time.
Lars, hold on. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hold on, we'll be going live in a minute, so that people are just joining, and then Joel, you'd have to do that again, okay?
Yeah, because I think it's 35 that we were set to go live, right?
Yeah, sorry, because we moved everybody across here, that's why. So hold on a second, sorry.
Sorry, I got a little confused there. Sorry, so we just need to see if we can maximize your slides quickly just before we start.
When I maximize the slides, I lose everything. So I'm just gonna mute myself in video, and then I'll just maximize the slides and just listen to you, Lars. So you just tell me when you want me to move stuff, okay?
Yep.
Cool.
And by the way, Chloe, when we get to the case study, you can move through them without having me say next, next, next. You can just move through the 4 pages there and just stay on the last one. And Joel, do interrupt me. Do stop me in my tracks. Do challenge what I say. Do bring your own angles to some of what I say. Let's make it interactive.
Yes. Yeah, I will be only doing the introduction probably, but I will see what you have to say and interrupt for sure.
At least you shouldn't have any problems doing so.
Yeah.
I've got it working, Lars, so that I can still hear you and speak to you. So.
Oh, good, 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 good.
So, welcome, Lars. Welcome, everybody, to our first session of today, which will be brought to you by Lars Vestergaard, Market Connect, Oracle for Startups. Oracle for Startups serves startups worldwide by enabling next generation growth, business development, and driving cloud-based innovation for startups, their customers, and Oracle. Market Connect introduces startups to Oracle customers. Lars will be taking you through how to develop 20-second pitches that will get your startup in the door at large corporations, very important, along with proven techniques to partner with and sell to enterprise clients. Over to you, Lars.
Thank you very much for that introduction, and hello and good afternoon, everyone. Very, very pleased to yet again be working with a lot of great startups here at World Summit AI. It was a pleasure to be part of it last year. I still am in dialogue with several of the startups that I met there, and with a bit of luck, I'll become friends of some of you, and we can also, from this year's setup, become good friends. So I'm Danish, I'm based in Denmark, and I'll introduce a few things here in a second in terms of how we are gonna run this session. But first of all, please consider this to be highly interactive. We don't have the pleasure of being in the same room this year. I would have preferred that. I would have preferred to be able to really get some group dynamics up and running, some virtual meetings happening face-to-face instead. Some of you making handshakes in the audience, and some of you who make questions and comments with similar kind of challenges that you could become friends and meet. So we're going to have to put up with the virtual setup. Let's at least, as a bare minimum, have you submit a lot of questions in the chat to me. But if the conference organizer and the tool will allow, please also think of this as a possibility for you. When I ask if you have any questions, you can raise your hand in the chat and say, I would actually like to come on video if the conference organizer will allow you to, and we can have a dialogue there. But I'm moving over to the next slide. So what it is that we are going to be working on today, and what it is that I'll be talking about is I'll do a general introduction first. And then the way that I have set up the workshop, it really is that we go to the whole core of things. Exploration. What is this whole enterprise selling? Why is it that we care about that? Working into enterprises, understanding it. Why do we do that? And then it's some kind of confirmation. And the confirmation is also very much what has been done in the market. What have you done in the market? And when I say exploration, of course, I have an idea of what that is, but you can even also help inspire the whole track all the way through to actions by giving your input to what should be part of the exploration. And when it comes to then the action points, I have obviously, as it was indicated, I have a desire to have some of you present, if the tool and the conference organizer will allow, some 20-second pitches, and I have some guidance into how you should think on that. So first things first, over to the next slide, who am I? So in terms of how I have come to be and what it is I have worked in, we are now in COVID times, and a lot of you, for the sake of enterprise selling, have been challenged with very typically now doing it over the phone. And I have had the pleasure of working in two different contexts for large scale-ups that both got acquired by publicly listed companies. One of them, I did phone selling from a town north of London to large corporates without really meeting them. And in the other one, I went, and it was a strange setup where I was allowed to travel extensively in Africa. I absolutely adored it. Went to a lot of sub-Saharan countries, and there I met those sub-Saharan countries face to face in 20 different countries. So we are going to juggle now between how is it those two different ways of interacting, how they work. I've been an analyst for IDC, Gartner Group, Forrester, Yankee, all of those analyst houses that predict how many iPhones do we have, or what's the market share of this and that technology. I acted as an advisor there for a lot of CEOs, a lot of great things back in the day, very much focused on mobile, all the way back from when we had the first iPhone, etc. I have lived and worked in various countries. A lot of people can't pick up on my accent because I've spent too much time in South Africa, gone to high school in the US, and then stayed and lived for a long time in London and Asia Pacific. It's been a great, I guess the world is my oyster experience, having really lived and breathed in a lot of different countries and cultures. When it comes to my education, I'm not a coder. I've never written a single code line in my life. Maybe I shouldn't introduce that. You'll think less of me. But fact is, I'm a networker, I'm a bridge builder, and that's what my role in Oracle is all about. So I'm Danish, I live in Copenhagen with my family. And if you take us to the next slide, here it really shows what is it that I'm doing. What is this Market Connect all about? So the program we have at Oracle is to give free cloud, just like a lot of the other cloud providers. We feel that we have a lot more on offer. And one of the things we have on offer is that we ask startups to really want to work with me, want to work with us. We ask them to fill in some qualification steps, but really all of those qualification steps are meant to allow me to help the startups, because I'm taking them down a route and down a journey of give me details that when I introduce you to a large automotive or to a large governmental entity, that for the colleagues or partners that I work with, if they ask, well, my customer only works on-prem, then I can send here's the architecture design. You can see that their solution works on-prem. It's this kind of journey we are taking the startups to as part of getting them aligned to really be corporate grade. And what they get is part of me. So the customer engagement part there at the top, that's really my bread and butter. I am indeed that glue between the largest corporate customers of Oracle in EMEA. I have counterparts in the other parts of the world. And then whether I do that through my colleagues, do that through the large system integrators or others, or I actually have end customer dialogue and context, is it depends on the various scenarios. That is how it unfolds. And maybe one very, very important thing is we are super active at events. So for example, big financial services event, we had the finance side last week here, and the finance world, they'll go to one big annual event, and I can tell you last year we took 10 fintechs, 10 startups to such an event. So we are very active getting you out there, whether it's on press or quotes or analyst or anything that relates to getting you into the media and into the market. So we think that is a very, very strong and beautiful part of what we can do with startups. I certainly appreciate it very much, working into that, seeing the new technology, seeing the new hearts and minds that you all bring to the market. So when it comes to then the exploration on the next slide, what we are going to look into is why should we actually care about this? What is it that you want to do? And let me start straight away by saying, I hope a lot of you are willing to sell your grandmother for the sake of winning your first big reference case study. It is really the bread and butter of what you all should, as early on, as early stage or round A, series A, whatever we call it these days, you should want to get and work very hard on getting that first use case. For a lot of you, that is a little bit incestuous. It could very well be your past employer. So for example, I met a super AI startup last year called Dataflux. Dataflux is from Germany. They used to work at Deutsche Telekom, left Deutsche Telekom, spun up a great new startup, and lo and behold, have managed to sell that into Deutsche Telekom, which is where they originated from because they had good contacts. So there is nothing wrong in thinking very incestuous in that first iteration of getting that all-important first reference case. And let me straight away say, you should not think that you should necessarily make a lot of money on the first iteration of that use case, of that business case that you go in and deliver. All you need, for the sake of you selling someone in your family, all you need is that all-important global brand. And I know a lot of you are maybe working in countries where you would work with large corporates that wouldn't necessarily be known. So if I were to be challenged in all countries across the EMEA territory and know what is the biggest bank in all of those, if you are financial services orientated AI startup, I wouldn't know. So ever so often having a big corporate in your home territory is not always enough. Really, if you could, like in this instance, a Yamaha brand is recognized by everyone. And by the way, this type of document is what we do when a startup does business with one of our biggest corporates and we collaborate. We have a design company that helps us, that generates this document, interviews the customer, creates it, uploads it, and you can then market the living daylights out of that document going forward. So my headline on the next slide, when it comes to what I call this kind of exploration. The thing is, I know a lot of you might even be a bit conscientious about wanting to go for enterprise because they are extremely risk averse. They are extremely hard driven by policies. Why would you ever want to go for those early on? And I'm not in this particular session gonna talk either in favor or against of you focusing on small and medium-sized corporates, that your focus is there and maybe stays there for a long time. But the session today is really aimed at how do you get to the highest level of corporate, very, very large setups, whether it's governmental or whether it's private corporate. And it's in that realm that we see a lot of you wanting to aim, because if you make it big there, just like Dataflux selling into Deutsche Telekom, the rest is downhill from there, because you really able to be heard and be listened to when you have made an impact at that stage. What I would like to also talk to you about then is, for the sake of you getting into that highly governed by strict policy, etc., how do you then get there? And let it, for the first time here, and I'll repeat it a few times, be said, you have to be super tenacious, super bold, and be amazingly insisting once you start to work with them. Do not be afraid of hustling corporates. They're used to that. I work with corporate salespeople who will even call up a corporate and say, unless you put an order in this quarter, I simply won't deal with you after that. Unless you start this quarter to buy what we've been discussing, do you know what? You won't see me again. I know salespeople from a corporate mind that are that bold. I know corporate people that build a 50 PowerPoint slide deck with an account mapping exercise on a corporate. It is going to the extreme, but if you get to build for one corporate an account mapping exercise of 50 slides, you will be seen by some as an evangelist, because you can start to tell people in that corporate who are the other people they maybe don't know of if it's a corporate with hundreds and thousands of employees, but that you think is important for a certain issue. I know that's very hard to demand that, but it's just to say that's what we see some corporates being managed as. So it's very professional and you can be very hard in driving that. And I'll get back to that a lot more. I've included growth hacking and bit scaling. So growth hacking and bit scaling, if we take the last one, that is really about growing your business very, very fast. So Reid Hoffman, who founded LinkedIn, sold off to Microsoft, has written that book about blitzscaling, and there's a lot in that a lot of us can learn from. Because what is your challenge? You are building a bicycle that you right now are riding, and at the same time you're trying to sell it. So to some extent in there is a predicament. And I can tell you, I was once hired into one of those scale-ups that I worked for because I had a huge network. I was hired because I have a huge network in Morgan Stanley, ABN AMRO, Merrill Lynch, Goldman Sachs, because I was an analyst there with IDC, and I advised on those early 3G licenses that got sold. I got hired by those very large financial institutions in terms of, is this 3G going to be something? Is Apple now focusing on 3G? What is that going to mean? Thumbs up, thumbs down. And I got hired by that scale up to go and sell a proposition to those old contacts of mine. And my product wasn't ready. I was trying to sell the product that I was still building, and the board asked me to literally halfway go and lie to those corporates, and I ended up saying, I can't do that. I have to keep my, I guess, personal integrity. So that is my other recommendation for you. I never lost my integrity in that, and I'm very happy that I didn't. It is super important that in this whole scenario, that you sell your solution based on merit, that you never oversell, but that you over-deliver. You have to be super honest about what stage is your development in. Are you in an alpha or a beta? And I don't expect you to work on scrums and sprints, but if you can give a timeline, a chart that says this is how my corporate ability to serve is going to be solved over time, and it's at this given point of time, maybe in 6 months, that I'm truly ready. So if in the first 4 months that we do a POC, please be aware that I'll be revising some of my models or some of my algorithms along the line. But if we stick with what I've seen so far, I know I'm going to be ready in 6 months. You have to be honest about that. Don't overcommit, over-deliver instead. And then it takes us on to the next stage, because are you a startup founders? As the CTO, are you good salespeople? I mentioned very early on in my introduction that I stayed in the US, so I went to high school there when I was 16 years old. And guess what? In my high school, I couldn't graduate unless I had taken and passed a speech class. The Americans are so good at sounding as if they know everything about everything. I don't know if that makes them the ideal salesperson, but fact is they raise their chin and they walk right into it, and they have an ability to sound convincing up front. There was a session I was speaking at, I think it was run out of the Czech Republic a few weeks ago, which was about the World Cup for startups. And the whole theme of that was, how do we go and compete against the US-based startups, because they have maybe higher evaluation, or maybe they have that ability to get more seen, more credited, and fare better very early on because of the boldness and their ability to sell. But I have to say, it's not just by whatever school classes they've taken. I've seen that a lot of startups based in the States have taken the selling very serious. A very, very small startup, even with 10 people, have gone out and found out we don't have the selling skills. We might have an ambition of getting a few salespeople included, but for now we need an uplift. We go and hire a coach, and we do immense sales training for a few weeks. I can encourage you, no matter what level you're at in your startup, to be very, very tenacious about finding out, do you have the selling skills that it takes? If you are a data scientist and your buyer is indeed, again, a data scientist, you might get along very well. But if your buyer is a hardcore procurement, they will run you around the stage just like a circus horse, and you need to know how that game functions. So I can encourage you to very, very much go and find out what are those selling abilities in your organization. And if you as the founder, if you have, I suppose, a mirror in front of you, and you detect that you may not be the best salesperson in the world, be honest to yourself and your startup, and then you should not be the one to lead the first selling discussions. I've heard about CEOs that are the founders that are really afraid of picking up the phone. They get sweaty forehead and they absolutely despise getting on the phone. You should get to know who you are. And if that sweat jumps out of your forehead, cold sweat when you are picking up the phone to cold call people, you should think about what other parts on a strategic level can you do for your startup. Find a champion. I had a call just last week actually with a procurement person from BT in the UK. Great guy. By the way, he told me every startup you encounter on AI, send them my way if they have just a smidgen of technology that can be used for a telco, but AI is my big thing. But what really strikes me in working with him is just, he also says, find a champion. And he is actually so gorgeous that he often is that champion. he is willing in a discussion with a startup to go that extra mile. So whether that is an incestuous person you know from a previous work, or a family member or something like that, find a champion that'll tell you how the company works. What is the timeline? Even if you start a dialogue and you as a startup think this is going to be a walk in the park, I'll close this business in 3 months, but it was always meant to be 12 months or 18, find someone who will tell you that. Find someone who will tell you who are the influencers, the buyers, the procurement people you need to convince, and who is the main stakeholder, etc. You should never be afraid of asking for that. You should never be afraid of sending a weekly or a bi-weekly reminder to really pull out that information. They are used to that. They are corporate. Do not hold back. The sales channel is very important. Very, very often at this day and age, and it links to the last bullet here as well, RFIs, request for information, RFP, request for proposal. When very large corporates, and it's always the case for government even have to go to EU tender so that it's going to be publicized. When they go to tender, a lot of times you as a startup will never be able to bid on that tender. Never, never, ever. It is large Deloitte, PwC, Accenture, local system integrators. They are the ones that will go and bid on it. A lot of times we as Oracle can't even bid on those because we are also a vendor. A lot of times a vendor can't bid on a deal. It has to go to a system integrator that then pieces together a package and can find somewhere in that they can fit you in. So what's the interest of a large entity like a system integrator? One, they sell consulting hours working on your solution, and two, they take a cut of your software license. They might take 15, they might take 20%. I'm very much appealing to you that if you sell software, understand the stack that your customer typically will go through to acquire software. Does it start with a tech data on Arrow that is used a lot up in the northern bit of Europe that I come from? Software distributors, where you need to be on a rack space as a SKU, you need to be a SKU that can be pulled down by a value-added reseller or system integrator, and then they can piece it together. Ever so often, there's a bit of a balance act to be had from corporates. Some of them want to reduce the number of entities that from a legal terms and condition and paperwork point of view that they deal with. If that is the case and you are on a SKU that can be pulled down and sold by an IBM or a Deloitte or someone else, well, then they are that entity. So you can be outside of that. You can be in another supplier, but it counts as an IBM provider or a Deloitte provider or an Accenture provider. So that is one thing of great importance. Somehow, if they go through that, that is important. The other one is we have started to see that, for example, the central government of the UK and other large corporates, for the sake of innovation, they've been given a directive that says we need to source from small players. So the exact opposite of what I've just said. So in that possibility there, for you to go in directly is a much, much better one, but still it requires a lot of work. And I can't say that a corporate or a country, you should choose A or B, but you should be very aware of how that whole ecosystem is working, how that particular customer you are looking at, what directive have they set, and what is their preferred provider. Just to give you an example, I had a startup that sold into a Poste Italiana, a proof of concept. It was a blockchain, it was an app-driven setup, it was an ability to when was a package delivered, who then took the legal charge of the package at what time. And the startup was super happy because they had sold a POC. Until I involved some of my colleagues in that discussion, and guess what they said? They said, we know exactly what goes on at Poste Italiana. They have a habit of only ever taking 1% of all the POCs onto general market. And by the way, we have never seen an app go to market in Poste Italiana unless it was developed by this digital agency. So obviously, that startup thought that they had made it big, but they didn't know of that digital agency. They certainly didn't know of the 1%. So obviously, understanding that whole procurement. So ask that contact you're working into, if it's a mobile app, well, who develops your apps? One thing is, I have developed my app, but should there be something else done to it? I've maybe done a bit of a soldier app. You have a ton of them. Whereas what the enterprise is after is a hero app, a super beautiful native coded app, and they should have a special digital agency go and do that. So these are some of the exploration issues that I want to bring in here, and you can certainly add to that. I'm sitting looking at the chat, so I haven't had anyone in the chat tell me anything about please include this as well, but you can do that now. You can tell me what parts of exploration do you think it's important, and then we'll try to carry those through for the rest of the workshop. So going on to the next. When it comes to networking, I have one super example here of a serial networker. It's a startup that I encountered several years ago in a meetup. We looked at one another, we tangoed, we fought, a little bit like in Matrix, where at one point he's up against this Chinese guy on the table before he goes to see the key maker, and he says, you never know who you are in front of unless you fight someone. I wouldn't say that I did that with the CEO Asa Smith, but we got to be good friends. What he has done that I think is very, very much something that all of you can utilize is that he's a serial networker. If you look at the fact that he and I now have 485 shared connections, whenever he is doing anything with the channel people that I introduce him to, or whenever he goes to an event, whenever he sees a list of 30 Oracle colleagues, for example, he will send them immediately a LinkedIn invite. Once he's starting to build up that credibility, so that if it's my Oracle colleagues that we are looking at using as a channel, if a random salesperson in Germany logs in and sees that he's connected to another 50 people or another 100 people that that person is connected to on LinkedIn, then somehow that builds credibility. In addition, guess what he has then done? And it's hard for you to do with any of the cloud vendors you work with as a standard. But what he has done is he has gone in and tailored some messaging, tailored some part of his solution where if a customer buys my solution, they should actually also buy these sets of corporate Oracle solutions. Why does that matter? I can highly recommend you to that if you are working with any other software partner, try not just to be an add-on. Try not just to be 50 licenses of something has been sold and then you activate 50 licenses of mine. What if the presence of you will add the ability for whatever software company or other partner you work with, an add-on sale? Then you have some very coin-operated salespeople getting very excited. Then we are looking at co-selling. So another recommendation of mine, how can you possibly get it to be a co-selling, everyone benefiting scenario that you're working into? And it is a little bit like the one-arm bandage. You put a coin in and you pull. If you go to Las Vegas and you see if that dime or that quarter has made you rich. Being coin operated, you can go home and play the Pink Floyd song Money, if you will. But trust me, a lot of software salespeople think like that. And if you are appealing into a channel, if you are appealing into a system integrator, one thing is that you can appeal to how your technology is super, super great. But I tell you what, no channel is ever going to sell it based on that, and no customer is ever going to sell it based on that. A customer will buy when it serves a need for them. So that person that I know at British Telecom, he will not buy a solution even though he's excited about startups and excited about technology, but he'll only buy it when he has found that there is a need. So that is very much part of it. Appeal to the need, appeal to solving that, and appeal to the people you work with. How will they benefit when that need is met? Next one, please. I have another example of an interaction I had on behalf of this particular startup. I introduced them to some of my very large colleagues. If we have a big customer in Oracle, they're called a key account, and the master puppeteer at the top of a hierarchy managing such an account is called a key account director. I introduced this particular startup into 2 key account directors for big life science organizations. And the key account director said, Lars, this molecular, they're from another continent from where we are. They're from the States. Can you get them to give us some case studies? They did better than that. They actually brought a customer, a PhD scientist that was a customer that could explain the value of that product within that particular day-to-day scenario that data scientist was going through. If you somehow, linking back to that Yamaha story, linking back to appealing to value, if you somehow can appeal to how the story tells itself, how others tell it, and you can just rest on your laurels because someone may sell it better than you. So that's also part of some of the pitch work we are going to go through. Someone may sell it better than you. So activating that. This was, of course, as well, they needed to have that first customer. So if you're pre-seed and don't have a big customer yet, it's obviously hard for you to appeal to that. But that immediately opened up that door and the meeting went ahead. Next one, please. So confirmation. I would love the thought of you now giving us in the chat if the conference organizer sees chat, if the conference organizer can allow a person to come on site, come in on video, but how have you networked and sold virtually? How have you, for the sake of this current moment of time we live in, where you can't go to a lot of big 100,000 people events, if it's Viva Tech or any of those very large events where startups would go, whether it is in Portugal, whether it's in France, whether it's in the UK, how have you done that? How has it worked for you? If you can talk about how have you broken the indirect channel? How have you done that? And if we don't do it now, then launch some community thinking on the back of this, because this tool is going to be alive for a while. It could even be that the conference organizer could manage to connect some of you. If I have a challenge working with the system integrators who have done it and we can matchmake a little bit, that kind of scenario is important. And then, are you a good salesperson? I'd like to see some come in and confirm whether you are or whether you are not aware of how, if you look in a mirror, how are you? And I must say, it's a funny thing. If I should look at myself, I've taken a lot of these Myers-Briggs type indicator tests or DISC tests where you come up in 4 different colors. I even worked for an organization where we had the huge Lego blocks, and in front of each of us on our desk, we would have those Lego blocks in the order of how was our personality. And I think I came out, they sometimes called me a parrot because I had that somewhat personality trait of talking a lot. And ever so often, if I would meet one of my developers in that organization where I was the managing director, if he had a green or blue on top, which was he's the engine room, he's the one with the mindset of development, not so comfortable talking, maybe I should walk up and approach him in a bit more of a gentle manner. But fact was that spat out that I was indeed one who would be prone to be able to pick up the phone and make those cold calls. But having said that, for the few years that I worked on cold calls, it wasn't always nice. Maybe I had a list of 10 people that I knew when I met up on the job in the morning, that those I would like to call. And by the time I had called 3 of them, I was mentally drained. So even if you think you're a good salesperson or you might have the trade, there also might be days when enough is enough, when 3 calls on that day was only ever going to be what I was going to be comfortable with, because even with the 10 on the chart, those were going to have to go on for tomorrow. One of the important things on this slide is value. So what value do you bring? Part of what I'm getting to, and it's a bit difficult for me here to have you recite your 20-second pitches, but it's that you do make a huge difference in how you pitch. Have you made a difference in how you pitch? Are you making a difference depending on, are you talking to a VC and are you talking to a customer? Please don't let that be the same pitch. You will never get away with having that as the same pitch. In the customer scenario, it's always the value that you bring to that customer. Where have you done it with success in the past? And what is it that you can, we hear that whole what wakes you or what keeps you awake at night, but how do you solve a big inherent issue within that organization or for that person you meet? That is a skill, because appealing to value, that is not a one-way track. Appealing to value is a dialogue between 2 people, between 4 ears and 2 mouths. And that requires some kind of personal connection, an empathetic bridge that can be built between 2 people, because people buy from people. So I can most definitely encourage you to, whenever you do the whole pitch side on value, to also appeal to the value depending on the person. If we think that it can scale all the way to be unique for a unique individual, that is maybe taking it to the extreme. But I would very much now appeal that you make a huge differentiation when you give your value pitch to whether it is procurement, whether it's the business, and whether it's the IT department that you are talking to. I would recommend you to segment and almost document, almost for the sake of letting your colleagues know what work and what don't, but go in and play very hard onto that whole concept of value selling depending on persona, not necessarily the Lego building blocks, because you can't ascertain ahead of time who that is. You can never go and ask, so what profile are you on DISC? But you can somehow get a feel for rapport. A lot of people click straight away, hard to find out over the phone, and yet maybe you can. Biggest barriers to enterprise selling. I touched upon that a bit earlier. Notorious for policy, notorious for being slow. But what are the barriers? What have you encountered? I can tell you that this whole situation of very large corporates being risk averse is something you have to take very, very serious. I'm an old kind of IT guy, started back in the mid-90s. I actually worked on a competing technology to IBM. So I got very accustomed to that whole concept of you never get fired from buying Big Blue. You never get fired from buying from IBM. In that particular respect, you are a risk. You are a startup. You are not proven. So how can you mitigate the risk that inherently will be felt by a large corporate when they go and buy a solution? Somehow, the way you work into that is super important. The way you do not oversell, but you over-deliver. The way that you may want to financially rig or set up the deal so that you basically go in and say, I know you're taking a risk, but I'm so confident in how I can deliver value. And very often, value is increased revenue, or decreased cost, time to market, that you will deliver on one of those parameters You will set a target that you'll deliver, and then maybe do some kind of revenue share or something like that, that will allow them to somehow engage with you without it appears that they're taking a risk, and that it's a slow buildup. By the way, the person I showed you there on LinkedIn, they are a digital assistant, a chatbot vendor. Chatbots are a risk when they are to the customer side that you introduce a chatbot. So if customers self-service on a chatbot, you have a risk because they can have a bad experience and they may not do business with you. The way that we very often see that in chatbots is that they then get used internally. So if the chatbot gets used to, for example, here are the top 10 questions asked to HR relating to COVID, or my child is sick on the 3rd day, I can't send them to daycare, or how many holiday days do I have left, or I've lost my employee number, I need that for a requisition or for raising an invoice or something like that. Those kind of simple questions that either as an email or as a phone call into HR typically are sent, maybe that is a low risk introduction of technology into an entity. So think about how your technology can become a low risk entrance in, where you have to realize you are not Big Blue, but you can be bought as a solution set anyhow. And I can see I have a question from Juno that says, RJ Juno that says, Lars, the virtual sales world is nothing new. As startup, made first sale 13 years ago with cold phone calls, great to hear. WebEx demo, great to hear. Not small stuff either. Deal done and check received before ever physically meeting them, and no prior reference. Super glad to hear that exactly this encouragement of you can do it. Others have gone and done it before you. So very encouraging to hear that indeed this can be done. By the way, my experience there on the cold selling, it only dates back 6 years ago. So I don't go back 13 years ago, just 6 years ago. I sold security software, and there was a lot of issues around security. So what I found was that security was so important that as soon as I had made the connection, I affiliated myself with a value-added distributor or a system integrator who had the relationship, because very often the security software I sold was part of a larger component handled by those entities. And if I affiliated myself with them, then it always made the sale easier. And of course, over time, they often would generate leads that would land on my lap. I'll never forget the time when I received a phone call from a gentleman at Carlsberg who said, Lars, I hear I should call you for the sake of acquiring software. That was a day to remember. That was a beautiful call to receive. Let's go on to the next slide and now dig a bit into some of these actions. Because remember the whole concept of a pitch, of a 20-second pitch. And by the way, I should maybe emphasize that I mean it when I say 20 seconds. And if you, when you are out at a conference, when they happen again, or when you are in a situation or a possibility where someone maybe a bit out of their comfort zone right of a sudden lands on your lap, if you have big long arms and you grab them as they walk by and they tell you they have 20 seconds, don't you dare take 30. Don't you dare take a minute. If they are running for the keynote session in the big conference room, the main stage behind you, don't you dare hold them back. You will ruin any ability to later on meet and talk to them. But if you appeal to how 20 seconds, da-di-da-di-da-di-da, this is the value, this is what is going to benefit you and your customers or you and your enterprise. If you can stick to those 20 seconds, that's really, really what matters. And in the physical world, last year in Amsterdam, we had a lot of you taking turns in giving your 20-second pitches. Now, it's maybe a bit stern, but fair. I asked a lot to redo, because what I'm trying to again emphasize is, first, let everyone know when you're rehearsing who you're appealing to. Let it be known to whomever you're practicing with that you are now going to sell to IT, or you're now going to sell to the business, and then give you a 20-second and then spar around that. Let always that visibility be part of it. So in this action point of view, let me blow the bomb. The last thing you should ever do is to give a 20-second pitch. The last thing you should ever do is to give any pitch. If I got to know you and called you at 2 a.m. in the morning, I do not want to hear you give a 20-second pitch. I want you to ask the cleverest question, or the cleverest, quickest 2 questions that you can possibly imagine. Because enterprise selling starts by asking the right questions. There is no need for you to waste your 20-second. You'll just annoy the guy. If your 20-second pitch is a mismatch to where that person is, a mismatch to where that person's needs are, or what that person's current role or future role in the organization is. Ascertain whether it should be pitch A, B, or C that you should deliver based on either one, ideally 1 or 2 brief, sharp questions. If you get to know what those questions are, and if you ask those, you will win such a heart and mind of that person, because if you ask the right questions, they feel that they are seen, that they are heard, or you know exactly what they are dealing with. Go and shop for those questions. Go and perfect those questions. That is absolutely what I would recommend you to focus on. You could even have big 1-week group discussions. A lot of you will maybe at one point get to, what's the mission statement of this organization? What is our strategy? What is blah, 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 blah? Those quite corporate things. You could even hire coaches that would allow you to get to that stage where you could exemplify this. I think you should take time in your corporate and really discuss and really perfect what are the best questions I can ask a possible customer, and on their response, I will have paved the way by that question for my pitch, and they absolutely could never avoid, it's like a hook, they could never avoid wanting to discuss with me more. So let that be, I suppose, the whole concept of this workshop. Everything we're talking about in this How to Sell to Enterprise is how to have the right questions and how to ask them. You should never be afraid of that either. I know that on a cold call, it's a bit of a mix. The person is not in front of you. Should you ask with a question, or should you give a little indication of the value you give? If you in the first 10 seconds can squeeze in that you provide this value, if you are a corporate where the following question would be an important one. So then instead of blurring out with all of your rehearsed and learned topic, you allow for it to be a conversation from the very get-go. That's what I think you very, very much should aim for and strive for. There's a concept here that I have also included is, how do you keep intellectual property in a proof of concept? How are you working on legal papers? How are you working with lawyers for the sake of that? Do you have intellectual property? Have you taken APR? Have you taken any IP? And it's a very, very big topic. And it's a very, very important thing for you to be aware of. And let me give you some examples. You can never avoid having large corporates run away with your ideas. It's very hard for you upfront in any conversation to have everything documented on an NDA, non-disclosure agreement, where once you have delivered what you can do, that you can trust that if that is of importance to the corporate, they'll do business with you. I've heard it so many times. I heard it with a very large UK bank. I can say it, it was RBS, Royal Bank of Scotland, a startup that I work with out of Estonia. They had a pitch with that particular set up. I think they even won it. And in the end, RBS said we can build that ourselves. I've heard the same with a startup that works on blockchain and turning vehicles into, I suppose, a transacting entity. They have introduced that to some large manufacturers in the automotive. And there has been a little bit of hesitance as in, oh, that is very important. That is very interesting. We have our own finance fund. We can do this ourselves. It's very hard for you to unfortunately protect yourself against something like this. You have to appeal to the good nature of people, but you can't trust that they won't turn around and do this to you. Ever so often, there's a vested interest, either from an IT department or a business. They have people employed, they have people that they need to cater for, and if what you go and tell them is that you don't need 5 of those people anymore because I'm now going to automate something for you. It could even be that they don't want to deal with you because that manager has 20 people reporting into him. He's not going to tell the CFO that he's going to say no to you and an ability for him to say 5 people. He likes to be a manager of 20 people. Ever so often, you'll come across those kind of things. And I can see there's another comment that says, with or without IP protection, do you see requesting an NDA as a hindrance for initial discussions? I definitely don't see an NDA as a hindrance. If you want to work around an NDA, then do me a favor. Don't have your own. This is going to surprise you. But it's often very hard for your NDA to be the one that gets signed because corporates have their DNAs. They have in-house lawyers. They have perfected their NDAs over years and years, and removing a comma in that might be difficult. So you have to appeal to that in a rather humble manner. You can say that you have an NDA, but that you are happy for the sake of elegance to use the corporate NDA because it can take weeks. And if you don't have a lawyer on your side, then battling up against a lawyer for the sake of trying to move a comma in a large corporate can be very much a losing game. And that is time that very often you don't have. I don't play a lot of golf, but a comment was once made that the more you practice, the luckier you get. It's a little bit like that here. The more you're out there, the luckier you get, because luck at that stage is not really what is at play here. It is that you are getting better. Luck is put in the back burner. It is your grit in the market that is taking you to where you want to be and where you are going. Next slide. What my recommendation to you is, it is to appeal to that value. It is to make it inevitable at a bottom line point of view what you achieve. And that is again going back to not a discussion from your side about how great your technology is, because that can't always be easily correlated depending on who is the listener, to value and a bottom line feature in the eyes of the corporate. You should always try to do things better or faster or cheaper. Going back to the data flux that I met there last year, what I love about them as well is that they actually managed to beat IBM Watson. In part of the AI work they did, they could showcase that they had beat IBM Watson. A small startup with some amazing PhD data scientists had come up with algorithms that for true AI, not batch job AI in analytics, true AI could perform better than Watson. That somehow is an amazing place to be able to be, and a good thing to be able to say. So always associate yourself with value and bring it up front. Don't hold back until the end. Bring numbers. If you can quantify it, you can count it, and you can measure it. So bring it up front, right in the face of the people that you're working with, what value you can bring. Increased revenue, saved cost, reduction in energy. I can tell you right now, I haven't really appealed to that a lot, but the SDGs, the UN goals for saving this world, it is ridiculously hot right now. I was on the phone with a friend of mine who runs a startup. It's in itself a startup, but they're called Valuer, VALUER.ai. They are a bridge between corporates who go and buy a quarterly or a monthly glossy brochure that says, introduce me, beautiful profiled, the top 10 startups of IoT sustainability increases that your database has found, and that spits that out. They have an AI engine that makes that. But what he also says is it's the SDGs. So one thing is, it's great to be a fintech selling to finance. It's great to be a retail selling into retail about a better user experience. But what really rocks right now is if you can do things better, faster, and cheaper, appealing to the SDGs. There is no vaccine to curing the world or cleaning the oceans for plastic. There is only a lot of robotics, a lot of AI, and a lot of cool startups to help this innovation along. So those of you that work in that, kudos to you. I'm certainly here for any of you who have an interest in collaborating, in getting out there, inspiring. I have a lot of calls after sessions like this with, I'm probably not going to be necessarily your best collaborative into Oracle company, but can I ask you a question? I always try to make myself available for those, even though mentoring the world is a bit hard for the sake of scale. Moving on to the last one. Here is my contact detail. Here is my email address. Very happy to work with you. If the context of getting the piping, the free cloud, the context of working with someone like me and that market connect is of interest and relevance for you, that whole oracle.com/startup is where that journey begins, where the cloud credits that we alongside all the other cloud vendors in the market provide. And I can see that it's also written in the chat here, if anyone has a hard time seeing the screen. And I can see there's a quote that I suppose my golfer analogy might have come from Arnold Palmer. I don't know if that's the case, but that's like a comment made. Any last questions? We are coming up on top of the hour that we had for this session. There's a lot of great further content happening over the course of today, and we really want to make sure that we are exactly on schedule, on time. I can see there's an organizer question to share audio and video. I have a feeling there might be abilities for this for replay, but I'll let someone else be the judge of that. Joel, any last comments from you?
No, not from me, but I think it was really a great session for all the startups and everybody that was here during this session. So thanks a lot. I hope you enjoyed doing it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. So thanks, Lars. Yeah, some extremely helpful tips there, and great to learn also from your experience. Just to let everybody know that our CyberShark startup competition will be starting in one of the session rooms now with my great colleague Alexandra Belikova, where 5 early stage shortlisted AR startups will each have 5 minutes to pitch their business idea to 5 investors. After each pitch, judges will get 10 minutes to ask questions about the venture and decide on a winner. The fabulous prizes include a 5K Oracle Cloud credit and a startup stand at the Inspired Minds Summit of their choice. So really curious who is going to win there. Please find it in the session room if you'd like to see that. For everyone else, I would like you all to head back into the main stage again now. You can find the button on the left hand of your menu. I'll be going back there myself, and we'll be continuing at 2:45. See you in a few minutes. And thanks, Lars.
You're welcome.